The Switch 2, the successor to Nintendo Switch, will most likely be coming out in March of next year. The graphics are supposed to be much more powerful, and it can even do 4K gaming. But the success of it is not guaranteed. Today, I want to talk about the things that Nintendo needs to get right if they want to have that success. I'm Derek, and welcome to Position Offset. The original Switch, while a huge success, for many has been a bit of a disappointment. Graphically, the first system did not really hold up to the expectation of the gamers who were promised a hybrid console from Nintendo. Nintendo said that this was both a handheld and a game console, both in one. But what it's actually turned out to be is just a handheld with a dock. And the reality of the matter is, the majority of players play in docked mode. So while the gamers that primarily play in handheld have been very content with the system and quite happy, those of us at home on a couch with it connected to a TV, if it's on a large format 4K display, it's very blurry and the flaws are very apparent. They get hidden on that smaller screen when it's in handheld mode. And so the promise of a Switch 2 that can give you a good 4K gaming experience from a Switch is very exciting for those of us that mainly play in docked mode. And if the rumors are true, it should be able to do that. It looks like it should be a fairly powerful little system for a handheld. And when it's ran in hybrid mode, it's supposed to be on par with like the Series S, maybe PS4 Pro, somewhere in between there. It's looking like it should be able to do what we've been asking for. However, it's not only important that new games on this new system look good, we also want our Switch 1 games to look good. It needs to have backwards compatibility, and it needs to be able to enhance your old games. Let them run at a higher frame rate. If they have dynamic resolution, let them run at a higher resolution. There will be patches and things, of course, but there needs to be a basic no code, no changes, no patches needed version, just like the PS4 Pro does whenever you run PS4 games, or PS5 when you run the same games. You know, they get boosted. The Switch has to do that, or I'm not going to be probably buying one at launch personally. I'm sure there'll be a lot of great games that come out for it, and eventually I'll get one. But the main thing I want this for is to be able to play my Switch 1 games at a decent frame rate with better performance. And then the problem for Nintendo is there's a few of us like myself that care about this quite a lot, but the majority of players are pretty happy with the system as it is. Especially if you play primarily in handheld mode, you're probably wondering, why do I even need a new Switch? The one we have is perfectly fine, right? And so Nintendo's core audience, at least at launch, is going to be those of us that are looking for a better 4K experience in their home theater. And I'm hopeful they're going to be able to make us happy. But then there are many other factors besides that they have to worry about. The Switch 1 is going to be competing with itself for a while. How do they handle cross-gen? The Switch, how does it fit into the greater ecosystem of gaming? I'm going to be going over all of that today and getting into the details as we go forward here. So, okay, what is the Switch 2 exactly? If you haven't been following the rumors and you don't know exactly what I'm talking about to this point, well, the Switch 2 is the successor to the Nintendo Switch, of course, and it's going to probably have what's called the T239 chip from NVIDIA in it. This is a custom chip that Nintendo's been working with NVIDIA on for a few years now, and it's based on the Ampere technology. That's about, the 3000 series GTX cards. And that means it's got, all the features of that Generation 2, including like ray tracing and machine learning acceleration for DLSS. And then additionally, it's got probably somewhere between 12 to 16 gigs rumored. I mean, once again, these are all rumors. Nothing's been confirmed from Nintendo yet. But yeah, somewhere between 12 and 16 gigabytes of memory, which either way is a big improvement. There's only 4 in the old Switch, so that's 3 to 4 times, depending on which one they go with. I'm probably going to predict it's 12, just because Nintendo likes to save money. They like to keep everything as cheap as possible, and I think it's not going to make devs' lives super easy. In fact, it's going to be worse than the Series S situation, but I think they'll still be able to squeeze modern games into that, at least for the foreseeable future. and then it supposedly got an 8-inch LCD screen. Now, some people would say this is a downgrade from the OLED, self-included, but maybe that LCD is for a reason. Maybe Nintendo's got something in their sleeves we don't know about, because remember, we've got little bits and pieces of information we're working with here. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out. I am personally hopeful that that means that this screen is going to have something special to it, like maybe it's got HDR built in. Really hope it's got HDR built in. And then maybe it can even do higher than 60 hertz. Maybe it can do 90 hertz or 120 hertz. That would be awesome if the built-in screen had that feature and it was standard for every game. But more than likely, it's going to be just a 60 hertz LCD, but probably a pretty good one. They'll probably upgrade to an OLED at some point down the road, just like we saw in this past generation of the Switch, but probably not for a few years. So for right now, hopefully it's a really good LCD. Now, I've put some of the specs up on the screen that shows a little bit more detail about this. There's tons of videos out there you can go look for if you want to know all the details, but that's kind of an overview on the technical bits of it. Oh, I guess there's also going to be a supposedly magnetic attachment of the controllers. Instead of going down the rail, they'll just kind of snap in, and I think it referred to as an electronic suction or magnetic suction system. So that might be kind of neat. And then supposedly there's going to be a microphone built into the system now. That's probably going to be for online gaming, but Nintendo's had microphones in old Game Boys before. You could blow on the screen to get past certain parts of certain games, or maybe you had to like whistle a little song or just do something to let the system know you were making some kind of sounds. Pretty rudimentary in the past, so with the modern era, maybe they'll get even more into that. So that's probably going to be the quirk that makes this different. The way Nintendo likes to do things. They always have to have some kind of little quirk to their systems. But then the most important feature for most of us is backwards compatibility. I want a Switch 2 so I can play my Switch 1 games at a better quality, at very least loading faster. But we'll have to see what Nintendo gives us in that category. It could be that we just get straight backwards compatibility. It runs exactly the same as it did on the Switch before. Or maybe we get something more akin to the PlayStation, where if you take a PS4 game and play it on the PS4 Pro or the PS5, it's going to run at a faster rate. I think the PS4 Pro does about 18% faster, and then the PS5 is like 50 or 60% faster. So you get faster frame rates. If it's dynamic resolution, you get higher resolutions, faster load times, even though it's not taking advantage of, say, modern features like the decompression blocks that a lot of consoles have, and supposedly Switch 2 is going to have as well. But I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, my hope is that the system is going to be able to take my old Switch games that maybe didn't have the best performance, or maybe the resolution was just a little too low whenever I put it up on the big screen in docked mode there. Hopefully this means that we're going to get better performance out of our existing catalog, and we don't have to pay Nintendo money to get an upgrade. There's a chance that they do a cross-gen brief period where they let you buy a game and you get it for both versions, the kind of way we've seen on Xbox and Sony. But this is Nintendo, and Nintendo traditionally doesn't do things like that. That would be new for them. It's completely possible that you get no upgrade playing your games in back compat, and if you want that upgrade, you have to pay for it. But until Nintendo tells us what's going on, we're not going to know. And for me personally, I'm holding out on buying new games until I find out that answer. I need to know if I'm going to have to buy this game again before I go buy anything else, so hopefully they tell us soon. But okay, speaking of telling us things, when are they going to actually officially announce this thing? Nintendo has admitted that it exists, finally. In an investor report, they said that they're going to announce it by the end of the fiscal year, this 2024, 2025. I'm not sure which one it is for them. But basically, the period that ends at the end of March next year, 2025. That doesn't mean that we're going to get the console in that period of time. It just means they're going to announce it. I think they're being vague just because they don't want to let us know the timing. And I think we could potentially still get it before that date. But I don't think we're going to get it too early in March. We might. I think, if anything, they're going to put it towards the end of March, probably March 28th. That's the last Friday of the month. And Nintendo does like to release things on Friday traditionally. But I think they're going to have it come out either at the tail end of March, so they just get a couple of days of this new money going into that former fiscal year, or they wait until the new fiscal year is completely started, have a clean break between the generations financially, and then they just release it at the beginning of April, maybe on April 4th. That'd be a nice little date, 4/4. But so when are they going to actually tell us this thing is real? Give us a name, show us a picture of it, give us a glimpse of a game. They're probably not going to give us a big full rundown right off the bat, but we're going to get a little taste of what the system offers. And if we go based on the rumors that were out there earlier this year, everybody was saying that it was going to be announced in March and then it was going to come out in this fall. And then in February of this year, everybody started saying, oh, it's not going to actually come out this fall. It's been pushed back to March the following year. And that sounds pretty much like the situation as far as we know. Nobody's really gave us any good information otherwise beyond that. Everything else out there that you're hearing is going to be speculation. But my own speculation here is that they probably did like any company. They were getting ready to launch this fall. They went to the developers of, say, the next big Mario or whatever their big launch titles are and said, hey, are you going to be ready in time for this launch? And they said, no, we need more time. And so it's like, okay, we're going to give you 6 more months. And so they pushed it back 6 months from the original launch date. So we can just kind of look at when was it originally going to be announced, when it originally came out, and then just push that back by 6 months and get a pretty good idea of, I think, when it's going to come out next year. And so if they were going to announce it in March originally, that's going to push them back to September. Now, it could be earlier, it could be August, it could be later, October, maybe even December. But at some point before the end of this calendar year, they're going to give us a little taste of what's coming, I believe. And then next year in January, they'll probably announce the full thing, probably right at the beginning of the year. They're past the Christmas period. They've made those sales. They're taken care of. The Switch numbers have gotten to whatever heights they've gotten to. Maybe they're the biggest console ever sold. We know that's a big deal for Nintendo right now. But in January, they tell us, here's exactly everything you want to know. Here are all the launch titles. Here's a good look at them. Here's what the controllers look at. Here's what the new quirk is. Here's how the screen looks. But knowing Nintendo, they're not going to tell us exact specs. Nintendo's never given out exact specs. We always have to wait until after the console comes out and developers and people kind of give us information, lets us piece it together, or somebody takes one apart and looks at what it's made of. But Nintendo never really officially announces specs, so don't expect that until after launch for anything concrete. But so then I think, end of March, like I said before, is likely, or beginning of April. We might see it in June. Nintendo did release one of the Game Boys in June way back. I can't remember when, but they probably will not hang on all the way till fall because they've got third parties on the line. They've got Switch ports, or they've got Switch originals that they intended to release back in the fall. Now they're also having to hold on to them for 6 months. They're going to want to get those games out as soon as possible, so Nintendo's going to have to get it out sooner than later, and I don't think they're going to hold on all the way to next fall. I'm pretty sure summer of next year is the latest they're going to be releasing it, most likely. Now let's get into the details of all the different parts and components here. I'm going to nerd out a bit, so you feel free to skip this chapter if you don't care. But let's start off with output. Modern TVs, since really about the time the Switch 1 came out, have all been 4K. You're almost impossible to find one that is 1080p these days. So 4K is a must in terms of what's being output from the HDMI jack. And now that doesn't mean that the games are going to render at 4K native, of course. That's not at all realistic for the Switch, but the output signal is going to be 4K. And hopefully that also means it's an HDR as well, with wide color gamut support too, hopefully. Because most players, the majority of players, remember, are playing at home docked on their screen. So this system needs to address that target. The handheld is nice, and a lot of people are going to use it that way, but it's a hybrid, and it has to target that 4K output as well. Now, will it be HDMI 2.1? Will we get things like 120 hertz or VRR? I would love it if we did, but Nintendo doesn't chase after the latest thing, and even though those are in a lot of TVs, it's not standard yet, so I would expect for them to skip out on those features, unfortunately. But then let's talk about the graphics, right? What's the GPU like? It's most likely powered by the Orin chipset from NVIDIA that they've been using in the Jetson line of accelerators for cars and robots and various things. But it's a very similar chip. It's designed for low power, but it does have machine learning capabilities baked in. And like I said, it's based on Ampere technology, so that gives you ray tracing and everything that an Ampere chip can do. But what we don't know is how many cores it has. The top-end model does, I think, 2,048 compute units, but they've got lower-end models that go down to like 1,000. So I'm thinking Nintendo's probably taking somewhere in between, around 1,500, give or take. But we don't know exactly how many of these cores they're going to utilize from the things that are already on the market. This is a custom chip. There might be pieces that we don't know about yet that have been completely made for this that are going to be a surprise. But we do know that it should be a pretty performant little GPU. It should definitely be much, much, much faster than the Tegra X1 that's in the current Switch. And so when it's handheld, I think it's probably going to be 60% of this, maybe even 50. But when it's docked, people are saying that it's going to be close to a 4 terahertz profile. It's going to be somewhere in between a PS4 Pro and a Series S, which is not bad when you think about the Switch being kind of on par with like a Xbox 360, really, in terms of its performance profile. Because it's NVIDIA powered, that means it's going to have much better ray tracing, and it's probably going to be as powerful or more powerful than the Series S when it comes to that. In fact, with DLSS in the mix, running at lower resolutions and then upscaling it, but if people can't tell that upscale, like the average person can't tell, it might actually look better on the Switch 2 than it does on the Series S if ray tracing is being utilized in a game. But once again, that's only in docked mode. When we're in handheld mode, we're going to have probably half of that, maybe 75% of that at best, but probably closer to 60%, I would say. So we're looking at probably closer to a regular baseline PS4 performance then, which is still much more powerful than the Switch and going to be a great increase. Now, in terms of raw processing, the CPU is going to be probably an 8-core ARM chip. They did ARM in the first Switch. I don't see any reason for them to change at this point. It's most likely going to be ARM again, but the more modern variant. And of course, at a higher clock speed than the original Switch 2. Now, what those numbers are, I don't have any good guesses for you today, so we'll just have to wait and see what Nintendo says on those. Or rather, what the teardowns show after it comes out. And then for memory, for RAM, like I was saying earlier, probably between 12 and 16 gigs. A lot of PC gamers are finding that GPUs with less than 10 gigs of VRAM are having trouble running modern games, and so that's not exactly an apples to apples comparison with what we're going to see on the Switch, but it does give us a little idea that there is going to be a need for a lot of RAM. If they're going to have 4K visuals, that means 4K textures, that means higher resolution models in terms of polygon count. They're going to have way more stuff that they're going to need to put into RAM to make those games look their best. But of course, we're talking about a Switch version, so it's not going to be as high resolution as we're seeing on those other consoles. This is still that hybrid concept, and so we can't expect it to be on par with the PS5. That's not realistic. But they're going to be pushing towards that, a lot closer than I think people expect. And now those systems, they have 16 gigs of RAM, so it'd be great if the Switch could match that. That would make developers' lives so much easier if they don't have to think about how am I going to squish it down for Switch. But realistically, Nintendo is going to give us the best components they can while also getting them at the cheapest price. They're trying to balance that performance versus cost, which is the Nintendo way. It's what they've always done, even back to the original NES. They didn't have top-of-the-line chips in the NES. They had a lot of off-the-shelf stuff and maybe even like a year or two old. So the patterns we saw with the Switch 1, where the Tegra was already a year or two old by the time it came out, well, now this chip is going to be the same. We're going off of Ampere. Odin went in production about 2 years ago. This is not the top-of-the-line chip. But compared to Switch 1, once again, much better. And the RAM is going to be much faster. It's going to be LDDR5X, I believe is what people are rumoring right now. But yeah, definitely more than the 4 gigs that the current Switch has. And then more importantly to a lot of gamers is how much storage space does it have? What's the hard drive like on it? Now, we only got 32 gigs of space with the original Switch, but that was expandable through SD card. And a lot of people expect it to be a similar setup on the new system. People are expecting probably 256, maybe 128 on the low end, maybe 512 at the high end, but probably somewhere around 256 for what's built into the Switch. And then you can go out and buy like a terabyte or something from an SD card. But they're going to be using UFS 3.1 most likely. It's one of the latest versions. It's very fast. It's not quite as fast as what you see in the PS5 and the Xbox Series, but it's pretty close. And it's going to be much, much faster than the storage abilities of the regular Switch. In fact, some of the first rumors we heard last year from Gamescom was that they had Zelda Breath of the Wild running at 4K and it could load instantly. Like there was no perceivable load time. And so that's the kind of speeds we should expect from Switch 2. It's going to be just about as fast as the other two big consoles. But if you want a decent amount of storage space, you're probably going to have to go buy the SD card to expand it. Now, one other feature I would love to see personally is the ability to do spatial audio, like Atmos, DTS:X, but knowing Nintendo, it's probably not a priority for them, so we'll probably at least get 5.1 like the original Switch could support. And now let's talk controllers. It's most likely got Joy-Cons. As the rumors say, it's a similar Joy-Con, but it connects differently through this magnetic suction. But what else is different about it? Are the buttons going to be different? Are they going to be bigger? Are the sticks going to feel the same? Are they going to go with a different type of stick entirely, hopefully to end all of the drift problems that the originals had? A lot of that is going to be just wait and see, but we can speculate. And I would predict they'll be very similar, but definitely different. Nintendo wants you to know that this is a different console. They had trouble with the Wii U most recently. Oh, really? No, the new 3DS was their other failure of naming, but in both those cases, the system was so similar, or it seemed so similar to end users that a lot of people didn't realize it was a whole new system. They just thought it was an upgrade or like a refresh. So Nintendo is going to want this to be different enough that people see it and know it's not the original Switch. They need some kind of visual indicator to people, and I think that's part of why they're making it bigger. You see that 8-inch screen, if that is real, and then it's clearly not the same Switch you've seen before. It's something different. But back to controllers, what could they add to these controllers? Hopefully they keep the HD rumble. That's great. It's very similar to what we find in the PS5 DualSense. Maybe they get it even a higher resolution, but hopefully that feature is more or less the same. Maybe better battery life, always something everybody wants. And there was a rumor that there's going to be a third trigger on the back, kind of that grippy on the back kind that you see on some kind of Pro controllers that usually you remap for something. So not really sure if that's true or how that's going to work yet. But there may be an extra button on the back. We'll have to see. And then for me, the best way to play the Switch is with the Pro controller. So, of course, I'm hoping there's going to be a Pro controller again. I don't know what they're going to add to it that the other one didn't have. I don't remember. I think it had Amiibo support built in. There's talk about microphones inside of the Switch itself. Maybe they'll put a microphone in the controller, kind of the same way that the PS5 has a microphone, so that you can use it to communicate in online games. But Nintendo has shied away from that kind of interaction online for a while because a lot of kids play their platform. And parents really like the idea that when their kids are playing a Nintendo game, they know they're not just talking to random people on the internet. Maybe they're doing text chat, but most of it's going to be little emotes and predefined words that they can say. So this is new territory for Nintendo, but we'll just have to see how they're going to utilize that microphone. And then another very important component is the battery. What's the battery life on this thing going to be like? If it's got all this extra power, it's probably going to be needing more juice than the original one did. Now Nintendo is going to have better technology than they had in the latest Switch, almost definitely. They're going to get the best battery they can, but they're also not going to get the bleeding edge. So expect a pretty good battery, but nothing that's going to blow our minds. It's probably going to get about 4 to 5 hours of use handheld, maybe even less, maybe 3, like we saw with the original Switch, depending on what game you're playing. And I think gamers are probably fine with that because the Steam Deck only gets 2 to 3 hours of life and people love it. So everybody would love to have 6 to 8 hours, maybe even 12 hours on that Switch, but it just doesn't seem realistic. So expect probably a similar battery life than you saw on the original Switch, or hopefully more similar to what we see in the OLED model. And then lastly, the thing that comes with the new console is a new operating system, the software. Nintendo can do lots of different things there that are going to be unexpected for us. So I don't even know what to speculate for you on that. The thing that comes to mind is software management, though, especially through the eShop. You know, people that are in households with multiple Switches have ran into lots of trouble with the digital games that they have. And so my house, we just buy cartridges so the kids can switch them in and out. We don't have to worry about which account is the primary account and if all the rights are set up correctly. There's a lot of games that just don't do well across multiple Switches, and Nintendo could definitely improve that experience. If Nintendo just spent some time making it a more refined experience in that regard, maybe even introduce the ability to share games, lend them out to people, that's really reaching, but they've definitely got to make that experience better if they ever do want people to switch to all digital, because for right now, it's not the same. You can't just as easily trade games around as you can with a cartridge. So we're going to have cartridges in this new system. They'll probably be a little bigger so that, they don't fit into the old ones and you can't get mixed up. But yeah, they're going to be around for this generation, and hopefully Nintendo makes the digital situation better. And so now let's go back to that question of why do we need all this hardware, right? What is the point of all this? Nintendo can make great looking games with the current Switch. Why do they need to even look any better, right? Some people might say that. But Nintendo is not the only company that makes games for this system. Nintendo is the primary reason people buy it, of course. It's a Nintendo console, you get Nintendo games, they're great. But third-party support is a big deal for Nintendo. They struggled with this, really starting with the N64, the GameCube, the Wii, Wii U. They really had bad third-party support. Most third-party support was going to PlayStation and Xbox. But now, with the Switch, they've finally gotten developers back on board. They've got really good support on the Switch, and they need to keep that going. Now, over the course of the years, there's been a lot of impossible ports made to the Switch, where you had this game that just seemed so power hungry, needing such resources that the Switch would struggle to play it. And somehow they whittled it down and made a version that could play. Games like The Witcher is an example that people bring up, or their port of Doom was amazing. The port of Doom on there is just, it's like, how is this possible on the Switch? And that same kind of thing is going to be happening with the Switch too, because it's going to be underpowered compared to the others, but it's going to be a lot closer to what the mainstream consoles have going forward. And so one thing a lot of people don't think about is today they're competing with the PS5. Today they're competing with the Xbox Series S, Series X. But in 2026, Microsoft is probably going to be releasing another series of consoles. I'm going to do another video about that at some point too. But PlayStation has got the PS5 Pro coming out this fall, most likely. Still yet to be confirmed, but most likely come out this fall. And then somewhere around 2028, there's going to be a PS6. These other consoles are going to keep coming out, as while the Switch 2 is going to be projected to live another 7, maybe even 10 years from the point that it launches. And so it's not just competing with the current gen, it's also competing with the next gen that's yet to even come out, because of the way that Nintendo has themselves positioned within the rest of the market. And so for third-party developers right now, it's going to be a great platform. They're going to take their game that they made on the PS5, port it down to the Switch 2, and it looks great on there, and they're going to be happy with it. But that's not going to last when we get to path tracing or whatever we're doing with the PS6, and now the Switch 2 can't keep up with it. Now they're having to do a lot of extra tricks, a lot of extra work to make that version work. Nintendo, they have done amazing stuff with the little bit of hardware they have, so I'm incredibly excited to see what Nintendo can do with this hardware. I mean, obviously, Mario in HDR is going to be the most colorful, vibrant thing you've ever seen. And the next Zelda at 4K with higher resolution textures and everything is going to look amazing. It's going to be a great generation for Nintendo games, and hopefully for the third parties as well. because for Nintendo, it kind of has to be if they want to keep the same level of success that they've had. And then let's think about how this fits into the greater ecosystem of games over the next few years. So for the past few years, Switch 1 has been kind of the baseline, the minimum, most unpowerful spec that your game is going to have to target. And the Switch 2 is probably going to eventually be that same role. It's going to be kind of competing for that role with the Series S, I think, for the next few years. But especially once the next Xbox comes out, then the Switch 2 becomes the baseline, the bottom performance profile. And so PCs will need to be basically on par with that if they want to play these games when they get ported over. And this means that developers are going to feel more emboldened to go after ray tracing, to go after more next generation features now that even the Switch can do these things. Now, all the consoles can do this, so why not support it? And so graphics across the spectrum of gaming are going to increase, even though we're going to have this new baseline to kind of tether us in place for a while too. And so the Switch 2's role within the greater gaming ecosystem is going to be pretty profound if it's successful. That's a big if, but hopefully Nintendo doesn't mess this up. All right, so now let's get into some predictions. So first off, Metroid Prime 4 was recently revealed finally after years and years of speculation and talks. It's finally a thing. We've finally seen it. Now, some people are speculating that the version looks so good it might be the Switch 2 version, but I don't think that's true, and the folks at Digital Foundry have also done an analysis and think it's probably just a really good-looking Switch 1 game. But it's also probably going to be a really good-looking cross-gen game. I think Metroid Prime 4 is going to be one of the examples they use when they are showing the difference between what the Switch 1 was capable of and what the Switch 2 was capable of. The version on there is going to be much sharper. It's going to have much better textures. The lighting is going to be even better. It's going to make that impressive demo we saw the other day not look so great by comparison, which is kind of the job of this new system, to show that, like, yes, the Switch 1 can look pretty good, but we can make it look better. And then, of course, there's going to be a new Mario game. The rumors are saying that it's probably going to be a launch title, and I feel like that makes a lot of sense to launch with the Mario game. The last Switch didn't launch with Odyssey immediately, but it came out within just a few months after its release. And it's been, 7 years, I guess, since we had a new 3D Mario game, so it's about time for one. And then we'll get another Zelda game, but that's probably not coming till like 2028. We just got a new mainline Zelda game, and so I wouldn't expect one for at least another 5 years from when that one came out. There's rumors about some new 3D Donkey Kong game. Maybe that'll be a Switch 2 exclusive. Maybe it'll be cross-gen. That's another thing we can talk about here. The cross-gen thing. I'm going to predict that at the period when it first comes out, the first year, maybe 2 years of the Switch 2's life, Nintendo will follow suit with the rest of the industry and say, okay, you bought Metroid Prime 4 for Switch 1, you get a free update to the Switch 2 version. But that's not going to last very long. And then after that point, you're going to have to pay $10-20 for some kind of patch, DLC, something to get your old Switch 1 game upgraded to the new Switch 2 enhanced version. Nintendo definitely is going to charge for some games that have been out for a long time. Now, Tears of the Kingdom just came out about a year or so ago. It might get a free upgrade, or maybe it's a little cheap $10 DLC type situation. But for Breath of the Wild, it came out 7 years ago. They haven't made any money off of that game in a long time. I don't really see Nintendo just giving you a free upgrade. I think you're going to have to pay for that version. And now, of course, I'm talking about a properly enhanced version that's been recompiled and is taking advantage of the new decompression tools and the hardware and everything. You will get to play in backwards compatibility mode for free, but if you want this kind of remastered version, that's what I'm saying, you're going to probably have to pay for, at least for titles that are more than a year old. And I also fully expect at some point we're going to get a Switch Lite type situation. They'll probably have just a pure handheld that's a little bit cheaper. It doesn't have the new suction things that they're going to use for the Joy-Cons. It's all built into one unit. But I also would love to see them do the exact same thing in reverse and make a console-only version, one that doesn't have a screen, doesn't have Joy-Cons, it's just a console that you plug into your TV. That could also be a cost-reduced version. I really hope Nintendo also gives us that option around the time they bring out a Switch Lite. And then, as I mentioned before, the rumors are all saying we're getting an LCD screen on the Switch 2, so hopefully at some point in its life we get an upgrade to an OLED model, because the version on the Switch 1 was much, much better than what we originally had, so it could be a similar upgrade at some point during the lifespan of the Switch 2. And then my last prediction is that the Switch is going to initially sell really well, and then it's going to see a dip for a while. And then I think if they do go with cross-gen strategy, and you're seeing Nintendo themselves continue to release games for both platforms for the next year or two, then we're going to see some slow transition. The PS4 still selling today, unfortunately. It's been, 3.5 years since the PS5 came out, but if you look at the numbers, Switch 4 users are still 50% of the PlayStation user base. And so if Nintendo finds themselves in a similar situation where a lot of people are opting to keep playing their original Switch and not getting the new system, they might be in trouble. And for a brief while, I think it'll probably feel that way. We'll see a dip. There'll be all kinds of talk and articles written about like, oh, the Switch is not doing so well and stuff. But then after a little while, more games will come out. More people will decide, hey, I do think I want to upgrade. And then it'll be a successful system in the long term. But that success is not guaranteed, and Nintendo has to make the right decisions on hardware, on timing, on software, on so many things to keep the velocity, the momentum that they had with the Switch 1 going. Well, so the Switch 2 looks like it should be a pretty impressive little console when it comes out, but there's still a lot of things we don't know about it. At some point before the end of the year, we're probably going to get some kind of announcement, some kind of reveal, some kind of better idea of what it is than all this speculation and rumor that's been swirling for years now. But we'll just have to wait and see when Nintendo lets us know. Now, will the system be a success? That is also something that we're going to have to wait to find out. I think it could be a great success if Nintendo does everything right. But they need to remember, the promise they made to gamers was this is a hybrid system, the Switch platform. The first one basically ended up just being a handheld with a dock. And this system needs to be more of a console, not just a handheld. The additional power, the 4K output, bigger screen, all these things are going to equal a much more powerful experience than you got with the first Switch. And I'm excited about it. I hope you are too. But Nintendo is not guaranteed a win here. So for couch gamers like myself, Nintendo, please give us backwards compatibility. Give us 4K HDR. Make the system powerful enough that we can quit complaining about how bad the performance is in certain Switch games. Give us good hardware, and I think the gamers will all reward Nintendo for it. Alright, so that was my rant on the Switch 2. I've been looking forward to it for a really long time. I remember 2-3 years ago we were talking about the Switch Pro and how it was going to enhance the graphics of your games, and I've been looking forward to it for so long now, just to get to play Breath of the Wild at a decent resolution. I mean, I could get an emulator out, I could put patches on it and make it 4K on a computer if I really, really wanted to, but I just want Nintendo to make their games look good. Nintendo makes great games, and we should be able to see them in high quality. But anyway, yeah, this is my third video now. Still working on the quality here. Please bear with me. I've got a new microphone. Hopefully I'm sounding a little bit better today. This room is still really echoey, so I'm going to be working on a way to cut that echo down in the future. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. And I've got a lot more coming up. Please do like the video, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. I'm still trying to get this channel going, and I appreciate all the help and sharing and things that people are doing. So yeah, I will see you on the next one. Bye.